you may or may not want to start with a Cass question, but I think it's a good one.
It is a good question. Let me see if I can, it's right here. Could you put that on the screen?
Here we have it. I'll read it. Hi, Michael and Paul. I wanted email to let you all know I won't be able to attend tomorrow's session as I'll be observing Yom Kippur with my partner. I plan to watch the recording though, and am excited for the next session. I wanted to offer a question based on this week's reading, Michael, which you can choose to address if you think it would be useful for the group. At the end of chapter 6, Duncan discusses the way that the participation of poet and reader in an identification with the mythic, in HD's example, the Hermes actor, is the Hermes god. I struggle with not feeling my knowledge of mythic or religious systems is complete enough to participate in the constellation of meanings that such allusions evoke. On the other hand, intellectual study of these systems does not necessarily bring one closer to such identification because it becomes overly rational. What are other ways of thinking about or approaching this mythological aspect of poetry in Duncan's tradition? Thanks as always. See you next week. Best, Cass.
That's a whopper of a question. Well, I mean, I guess he's he's asking how to approach that material, I guess is what his question is, how to deal with it. You just have to like pay attention to the gods. I don't know what to tell you. They're like it's a question of how you imagine how you imagine the ordering forces in your life that are far beyond any control that you might even begin to think you have over stuff. And it's all around us. I mean, it's love, it's war, it's, you know, um, sacrifice, it's language. These forms, the forms that are part of our inheritance, that we are populated and live in the midst of forms that pre-exist us. And one name for those forms is gods. I mean, gods are like emotional states on steroids, right? Like it's like when Aphrodite comes after you, man, watch out. You know, you know who it is. And as you're falling madly in love and trying desperately to maintain some kind of rationality. And it's, hey, there she is. Um, so I guess it's not a question of like studying them, although, I mean, reading, well, it's like Hillman, here, Hillman again. I just read a book of his called Mythic Figures, which is a collection of essays on the Greek, the Greek gods and goddesses, and his thinking about how those particular orders of force play out in our lives. That's really interesting. I mean, he's good because he doesn't try to make it psychological. It's something that we participate in. It's not like it's your psyche. It's way bigger than that. Um, and I don't know, the forces, I don't know, did you read, well, I guess not very, what's his name? Wrote American Gods. He's in hot water these days for
Neil
sexual.
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman. Too bad, man. I really like his writing, but the stories are horrible. Um, but the American gods I thought was fabulous because I mean it really is that we do have gods now, and they control our lives in the same way that the gods of the Greeks or whoever control their lives. Uh, we just have names for them that make them seem um, mechanical or material, you know.
Michael, isn't this a situation where what's called for is a kind of knowing that goes beyond intellect? I mean, how does one begin to understand that? And if that's a valid question.
Well, I think, yeah, we're talking, well, actually, this is totally pertinent to the chapter on the occult uh, that we're going to be talking about, and we can talk about this in relation to that, because that whole chapter basically is about Duncan thinking through certain questions about what we know and how we know it, about knowledge or knowing. What is it? Because the whole, the occult, I mean, well, everybody knows, let's say, no, not me. I, I don't have anything to do with the occult. It's got a really bad rap. Um, and Duncan understood it not as, well, actually HD in the beginning of The Walls Do Not Fall has that line about the dime store mystery occult stuff where she's trying to, same problem as Duncan's addressing, she's trying to rescue the actual knowledge that's hidden or or opaque or somehow not accessible or accessed. Um, and she's trying to separate out that cheapened v version, if you want to think about it that way. I mean, there may be people who take it very seriously, but it has a reputation that leads to the dismissal of the very idea of a cult. But what Duncan does in this book is point out that we live in a world of occulted realities, occulted mind. I mean, what goes on in the unconscious is pretty occulted. Um, Anything you want to think about, like there's so much that we actually is hidden from us or that we hide from ourselves. And he rescues that idea of a cult by pointing out that fact and going through I mean, this anyway. What he does with Blavatsky, I find amazing. Blavatsky is a was a very interesting woman with a really tarnished reputation in terms of her heritage, although a lot of her stuff went on to become part of other spiritualist movements, theosophical movements. But she's like, I think she's seen as a fraud, basically, as someone who conned people with her talk of supernatural powers and people communicating from the dead and all this. But rather than get into like a defense of Blavatsky or a whatever, he sidesteps completely around that question and gives us a Blavatsky who is, first of all, trying to respond to or is responding to the quantification of modern culture, um, and the deep, deep nostalgia for some kind of spiritual connection. She's responding to that. Doesn't matter how she responds to that. The fact that she was responding to that is significant. That's what she was doing. And the fact that there was a she had a lot of followers for a while, is indicative of that hunger, that hunger. So he doesn't, even her, like she becomes almost occulted, like like why she was who she was. It's it's not interesting to go on about how she said this ridiculous thing and this was proved to be totally plagiarized from this text and this was et cetera, et cetera. That's not really interesting. What's interesting is how much support she had and why she had that support, which is how Duncan comes in, um, and pulls out all this stuff that nobody thinks about or sees. And that's part of his working the ground. Remember our working the ground at the beginning of Eros. This is him working the ground and turning over all of the commonplace, what's commonly accepted as real, as material, and opening it up to what's been hidden.
Jay had a comment.
Almost,
Jay had
sorry.
a comment. Jay Swan had his hand up there for a moment.
Oh, sorry.
I also, for those interested in HD, that chapbook that Joanne Kiger did about HD is fantastic to learn something of her life. It's also a great exercise. I can talk about that or put a link to the chapbook in the chat. That's what I'll
Oh,
do.
oh, you mean Blavatsky?
Blavatsky. Sorry, Blavatsky. Yes, I'm sorry.
And
Um, but I wanted to get Jay in because he had his hand up about 10 minutes ago. Jay, you still have a question?
Um, I have a comment if that's okay.
yeah,
So I mean, I completely disagree. Um, so time to stir things up. Um, I think that, so going back to the original question that Cass posed, I think um, the thing that's been bothering me about Duncan and has always bothered me about Duncan is why is he a dualist?
why
When
why
all
I'm sorry, why
why
what?
is he a dualist when and why does he admire dualism when all of his tendencies are towards universalism? And I think part of it is that he has an internal conflict between the scholar and the poet that he wants to unify, and he doesn't really know how to do that. Um, and I think that's why we do have to meet him on the scholarship front, um, as opposed to taking his scholarship about mythology at face value. And I think that's kind of the main point I want to argue.
Okay.
Um,
Anybody else want to weigh in here?
yeah, so I would like to say something about the occult business. Um, during the years that I was with Duncan, we had several discussions about Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner, by those who follow him, is said to be an Austrian seer. He is also known for his practical work. He's the founder of the Waldorf School movement and biodynamic gardening and the Camp Hill movement, which has to do with the disabled in our society and how to work with them, as well as several therapeutic movements, something known as eurythmy, and various other things. For our purposes, Steiner was an early theosophist who dropped out of the movement and formed his own movement called anthroposophy. He dropped out of the theosophical movement because he felt for every inch of knowledge that one gains in occult study, one must gain 2 inches of what I can't remember exactly what he called it, upright character, honesty, most pointedly is what he was talking to. Robert knew that I had been in the midst of a Steiner community for about 10 years because both of my kids went through a Waldorf school. And I studied Steiner during that time. So that when I left that community, my kids grown, I thought I was done with that. And I went to New College. And the lecture I walked in on was Robert Duncan, who at that time I had never heard of, talking about the Black ISIS. And I realized that I had left the frying pan for the fire. I would say that you get beneath his scholarly concepts and need, which he certainly had, to present himself at the top of his form. When you read that section following the occult section, I believe, about children learning, you remember that it's about children's toys.
Yeah.
And how they are so much more than just a toy. And the alphabet and other such primary tools of the child and how those tools are affecting the child. Well, Steiner couldn't have said it better. That is the basis of the Waldorf schools, that they are children or spiritual beings unfolding. And it is the adult's task to draw the education out of them, not to fill them with data like an empty pot. Consequently, in a Waldorf school, a child learns to write before they learn to read. so that the first thing they ever read, they are the author of, and other elaborations. I'm saying this because my understanding of Robert's primary interest is that he is always looking for what is behind the motion, what is the impulse, what is behind the impulse. Well, some kind of feeling, what is behind that feeling, and on and on and on, so that there's a constant unpeeling to arrive at some kind of, for lack of a better word, origin, which may in fact be a primary force or an emotional form that culture has pinned some god to or some name to. But that was the motivation that I encountered in working with him. And it didn't matter what he was approaching. It didn't matter if we were talking about history, politics, poetics, Greek gods. Uh, that dynamic was at work.
Mateo has his hand up.
Oh, oh, hey guys. No, I agree with what Julia's saying. I think whence the name or why a cult, it's hidden what's behind underlying forces or streams of deeper things that process. But I don't know if he was went into the if Duncan, from what I can tell, obviously didn't formally practice his deity yoga like some Vajrayana Buddhists do, or like maybe HD did. But I think the poem itself for him was his sacred activity, from what I can tell. You guys knew him, some of you. So I'm just surmising that,
Yeah.
and that something, whatever meadow is to him, and whatever that ancient memory of that game of Ring Around the Rosie is for him, as is some kind of a heightened non-dual state. It's so non-dual that it's immanent and transcendent for him, one would say.
And everything carried resonances for him.
Yeah, I could see that. But
I
yeah.
wanted to ask Jay what he meant. When you started off, you said that Robert Duncan was a dualist, I think you said. What did you mean by that?
Well, I'm taking that based on his admiration of Gnosticism,
Oh,
and
that's
not, yeah, and I think that he, um, yeah, that was kind of my like jumping off point for
yeah.
this tension I see in Duncan between the scholar and the poet and his desire to unify those things. And um, I mean, he's a hermeticist first and foremost, and I think that's why he likes HD. Um,
Yeah, can I say something about Gnosticism?
sure.
I think I hear what you're saying. That's the trouble that I have with Gnosticism too. The new Gnosticism, the old Gnosticism is that. But and I had this argument with Jack Clark many years ago, um, and he pointed out to me that most people, most people that he knew, poets who had some relationship to something called Gnosticism, did so not because of the theology, but because of the mode of knowing, the claim to a mode of knowing that was not limited by some kind of rationality, but it was still knowledge. It's knowing. And I mean, the Gnostics, well, it's hard to generalize, right? Because there were so many different schools of Gnosticism, like hundreds of them. Um, but the, they saw they saw a world that was divided into black and white, good and evil, and they found themselves trapped among evil. And you know what? That's a very attractive fantasy. Often, It- I will give it that, but it doesn't. That's not the what can I say? The limit on on our understanding of Gnosticism. I don't think because gnosis is the issue. Um, and what you see through gnosis is that's another question. Do you know what I'm saying? Like anyway, so I would not, I would, I don't think of Duncan as a dualist, like at all, really. I mean, I think that his whole notion of when he says, and he says this over and over again, he says, it's what is. You want to know what's happening. It's what is. And what is for him, it was his way of indicating the whole enchilada, the whole, that it's all, I don't know, it's just,
Well, isn't it fair to say that there are many layers of being, and any basic Neoplatonist is going to have at least three levels, if not, and you can have infinite levels of being from matter's pure spirit. And he's just, he's open to all those in some sense, from what
right,
I
that's
can
right.
tell.
And he's definitely not like condemning the flesh as the traditional Gnostics did, at all. Exactly the opposite, right? I mean, he sees, it's hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. Hot luminescence. God, I just love saying that. Hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. So you've got the luminescence, the light, the burning of the divine, but at the it's it's at the edge of the visible. It's like material. It's manifesting in actual clouds, that hot luminescence.
It's a palimpsest, right? Right.
And it's a palimpsest. Yeah, there's always. I don't know if you saw. I put up a PDF of palimpsest, or Paul put it up at the workshop site. If you want to download it, and
Yes,
if you
it's
haven't
both on the
seen
workshop page and on the comment page.
it, yeah,
I wanted to share something that might be related, Michael, and
yeah,
something from the book. So I'm just going to do the screen share and read a a paragraph that I underlined and might be relevant to this conversation. I also still feel that Cass's question hasn't been answered, but maybe that's just me. So if I go to the PDF of, he's talking about William Carlos Williams. Williams' local condition and his no idea but in things must ring true, find their resonance in the dreams of the race and in a relativity of measurements that applies to everything. Even as HDs elect, the lovers of the writers must somehow in their vision prove to keep the dream of everyone everywhere. The very heightened sense of the relatedness of everything sets poets apart. The very secret of the impulse in poetry is the troubled awareness the poet has of meanings in the common language everywhere that those about him do not see or do not consider so important. And then he goes on to other things, but it seems to me this is a very non-dual kind of thing, but maybe I'm just trying too hard.
I mean, he's dividing the world into poets and non-poets. I don't see how you can be less dualistic than that.
Can I jump in here? I love that idea of dividing the world into poets and non-poets. I think that's really interesting. Um, the idea that there could be poets and non-poets. Uh, not because we have to think of the world as poetry or non-poetry, but because there could be something that actually divides that in a real sense. And so I think this goes back to what you were saying, Jay, earlier, into how Duncan might be dualistic, which I don't think he is. Um, but I was just reading um, some stuff on Jacobin, which I like to do. And there was an article on a book that came out recently. I think I sent a link that says analytic philosophy is basically a sort of um, liberal capitalist ideology, which is completely absurd, right? If you look at the history of analytic philosophy, look at Bertrand Russell, look at Quine, Donald Davidson, uh, that's ridiculous. But I was thinking about this because I was reminded of a point that Alain Badiou made in The Age of the Poets, where he actually did distinguish between philosophy and poetry. And philosophy is trying to make a set of arguments. Poetry is doing something different. And I think in book one, Duncan is sort of touching upon the question of argumentation. But in book two, he's all in with poetry, and he's showing us what that means. And we can see that at the end of book one, when he says that if poetry has to do with enchantment and the imagination as traffic with what is not actual or made up world, if indeed these would be serious poets wove a romance of the actual self, then religion and art may both be fictional and sensitive. Their truth and reality is the intensity needed to make uh, uh, what is not actual real. And I guess my point here is that that's not duality. That's a distinction between philosophical argumentation and what poetry might be.
Well, what's wrong with a little duality? I mean, language itself is going to, by a definition, have a dualistic quality to it. There are degrees, though, of hardening. I get it, but Jay, but maybe a little duality is natural.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I think it's Duncan trying to resolve something within himself. And I find what Boyd says very interesting, and I need to think about that a lot more. I think that is I think you're really onto something there.
I wanted to, Paul, I wanted to say this further about what Cass's question, which is that I think you have to look at mythology as a mode of thought, almost as a language. It's not it you have to literally enter it in a sense to learn it. But it's actually like a mode of thinking about the world, as as a process beyond us, that we are part of.
Yeah, and I think it's also like the difference between mythology as a kind of allusion to references or things like he was talking about Eliot before,
Yeah,
as opposed to uh, what I mean, Duncan's talked about it a number of times. The evocation or invocation are actually like bringing down the God into the poem, so that you don't. It isn't that you need as a reader to know the details of the Hermes myth to be able to understand the poem.
yeah,
Hermes is there acting in the poem.
yeah. And if you're a sensitive reader, you will actually pick up some of those vibes and from the poetry,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Hermes vibes.
like I'll jump in. My sense is, I mean, Duncan and then HD in turn come from such radically different cultural moments in which, for both of them, I would say the study of both Greek and Latin in public school was a phenomenon that was accessible. There was an entirely different sensibility to the material that is certainly HD refers to. But I would pick up on, Michael, your references to Hillman, and the relevance of that mythological sensibility. One of Hillman's books that I think is highly relevant in the moment is his book Mars or Ares, A Terrible Love of War,
Yeah.
in which we can see yesterday with Hegsis and the Orange One, with their message to the troops. Here is Ares, here is Mars. And that God is like alive and well, but not acknowledged, because our whole mythological reference has become Christianized and dualized. The fellow who attacked the church, seeing the Mormons as Antichrist. It's like this, it's so rigidly dualist that, and it's the only way people can think about the world in which they establish, in which they exist. So it's like, I think Cass's question is very important and very significant, because is there a way that as poets or as citizens, we can shift the perspectives and broaden the perspectives so that we aren't stuck in such a profoundly Manichaean kind of structure that we're working with? And I think Hillman is like a critical link or
Yeah.
way into bringing that sensibility forward. Just put that out.
What did you say, Paul? I just saw part of what you
I just
commented.
put Cass's question in the chat so everyone can have access to it. And the last part of it, what are other ways of thinking about or approaching this mythological aspect of poetry in Duncan's tradition? And I'm just reminded of that Zen story of the guy who was the monk who was a Zen student, and he read and he read, and he was asked about something. He was given his test by his teacher, and he would scan his brain, sort of like AI. He would scan his brain for the right scripture, Zen scripture, and his monk wanted him to think from his original self, and he couldn't do it. And so he gave up. He got rid of all of his books. He went to be, a janitor essentially at a modest temple. And then he heard the sound of stone hitting bamboo, and he was awakened. Right. So I think it's a kind what Cass is trying to get to is a kind of knowledge that you're not going to get your, left brain around. It has to be a right brain kind of thing. You have to take it from a different thing. It has to be, you have to have an experience. You have to put enough. Cathect was a word that came up in this week's reading. You have to put psychic energy towards that. And then if you're open enough, the knowing of it will come to you. But it's not a kind of a left brain, like, what does this poem mean
No,
kind of knowing. It's not a
no.
it's a negative capability, I would
Yeah,
say.
and it's also sometimes called gnosis.
Mhm.
Right.
Maybe it has something to do with being able to put ourselves or our bodies into the state that then invites the knowledge,
Hmm.
which is just sort of picking up on your story there, the Zen story, Paul, that we have to be in that sort of state in our nervous system, that regulated state that allows that kind of openness,
Well,
openness of
I,
thought.
I think Duncan is saying over and over again that the poem is an opportunity for that.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's as, maybe I don't understand Cass's question. Um, but I think I mean, you read. You, you want to enter into, you want to enter into that world, read what people have said about it. Um, and look for, look for ways to find correspondence in your own life. Um, because it's all there. But yeah, it's a quest, I guess you could say, or an ordeal that you put yourself through uh, in order to work the ground, um, as Duncan says. I don't disagree, Jay, with your sense of Duncan working something out at all. I mean, I think that's what he's doing this whole book, you know. In a way, I mean, I don't want to make it too mechanical, but these chapters, well, he starts off with, we've got like basically four chapters, right? Five, four, four, five, six, three, four, five, six. And after the first two, the introductory chapters. And when he starts off saying the work, the ground, and eros lie at the heart of our study here, the work itself is the transformation of the ground. Well, I would argue that what follows then is the ground, is his engagement with different facets of the ground that are determining of our relation to the world. One's eros, that was obvious. The whole palimpsest chapter has to do with time, um, how we understand time, history, identity, the way in which reality itself is one layer overlaid by another layer overlaid by another layer. And we went there's a we were in Rome once and walking around the street, just wandering around. And it was an oval shaped street. No reason why it was an oval shaped street. You got to the top and they had been excavating and they had excavated down all the way down to the Etruscan layer. So we're talking what, 2,500 years. And there was a circus down there. The Etruscans had built a circus, and that form had continued to shape everything that was built after that for 2,500 years. And we were walking down this oval street. Um, so palimpsest, yeah, it has to do with time. Occult has to do with knowledge, gnosis, how we know what we know, what do we know. And the six, the rights of participation, I think it's a little harder for me to put my finger on, but I think it has to do with how we're together, um, and what that has to do with the worlds that we find ourselves in. How are we together? The rights of participation. Um, and especially at the end, he works out his own togetherness with those poets who were so significant for him in terms of the ground that they opened at the beginning of the 20th century, the grounds of poetry. And so he goes through each one of those things. Those are all like fundamental aspects of humanness, right? Of how we see ourselves, love and time and relationship and knowledge. I mean, and he digs up each one. You just start digging and digging and digging and turning over the soil and turning up more stuff and more stuff that we didn't know, stuff that um, background stuff, etymological stuff, like he's an archaeologist and he brings all this stuff to light. And as he does that, don't forget, he's stated what his goal here is to arrive at a poetics. It's a quest for a poetics. And each one of these topics that he sets for himself is a fundamental part of the ground that determines our stance, our relation to the world, and hence our poetic, whatever that is. I just wanted to generalize a little bit about because I think he knows damn well what he's doing, and he's setting himself up now for this incredible performance of this virtuoso performance of self exploration, digging down crucially, digging down from a position now informed by what happened in the first part of this book. I mean, it's such a treat to read this again. And I love the stuff about where he's going through at the end of chapter 6, where he's going through HD and Williams and Pound and what they did and how it shaped him, what it meant to him. It really opens up, well, the creative process, I guess, the debts that go into creation.
Michael, I also think at the end of 6, where he starts talking more directly about how we might participate with poetry itself.
Yeah.
It's like he's setting us up for part 2.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, Julia. I couldn't agree more.
Michael, could we read that part? Should I put it up on the screen?
Sure.
Where do you want to start from? I have it at, I think this was read before. This,
192.
Oh, yeah.
Michael, I have it on the screen if you want to read it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to skip the part about Augustine. Eh? I liked that.
You want to go to that?
No, that's okay. It's long.
I liked it too.
I like it too.
Yeah. All right, but I'll
Okay, we'll do this. To write at all is to dwell in the illusion of language, the rapture of communication that comes as we surrender our troubled individual isolated experiences to the communal consciousness. But this commune is not, even in the broadest sense, the language of the human society at large. To write in English is not only to belong to a language world different from French or Aranda, but also to belong to a language world different from, though within, the English-speaking world at large. Writing and reading is itself an initiation as special as the totem dance of the Aranda. And just as the Aranda learns to read his own parts in the parts of the landscape about him, so that the body of the world becomes one with his own consciousness, so we learn to find our life in a literature, and in turn, literature itself is valued as it seems true to life. But once we would derive our life not in terms of tribe or nation, but in terms of a larger humanity, we find our company in Euripides, Plato, Moses of Lyon, Faurer, or Freud searching out keys to our inner being in the rites of the Aranda and in the painting processes of Cezanne. We must move throughout the history of man to find many of our own kin. For here and now, those who think and feel in the terms we seek are few indeed. But from each of these the cry goes up, to whom other than us, their spiritual kin, from an intense solitude. Not only Freud's, there are very few who understand this, but Stein's, do you know because I tell you so? Or do you know? Silence. My long life, or Joyce's thinking always as if I go all, as if it, sorry, thinking always if I go all goes, 100 cares, a tithe of troubles, and there is one who understands me, one in 1,000 of years of the nights, or Pound's plea from Canto 116. I have brought the great ball of crystal. Who can lift it? Can you enter the great acorn of light? But the beauty is not the madness, though my errors and wrecks lie about me. I cannot make it cohere. That's enough, eh? Do
Yeah.
you want more? I cannot make it cohere. He was sad. Yeah, I mean, if this workshop, I don't know why people are, I mean, people take this workshop, I suppose, for various reasons. One of the things that I would hope you would take out of this workshop is a deeper understanding, because I think you're all writers, right? Everybody here writes poetry. Take to heart Duncan's sense of the ordeal that is involved in arriving at a poetics.
Scott, please pipe up.
Sorry, what?
Scott put something in the chat, but I'd like him to say it in his own voice if he'd like to.
I can say it because I can also read
Oh,
it. Michael, I'd love to hear sometime about your work in Victor's with the editing of the text, challenges, and also the effect on you while undertaking the work sometime. And so I wasn't necessarily thinking this evening, but I'm very curious
yeah.
about that.
It's a long story. It's a very long story, Scott.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sorted. It's sorted and yeah. Well,
You can hold that thought if you want. Just,
okay.
There's also the possibility you could write some about it in the chat, in the comment section. So that's something that we can
Yeah.
refer to. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I want to write it. I don't know if I mean, shit. Well, it involved thievery, you know, stolen manuscripts and smuggled out of the special collections.
that's very hermetic.
It was.
That's Hermes at
Yeah.
play.
Yeah. 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 And, it was like, I don't know, things just click, you know? Like you have no idea what you're doing at a given moment when you take something. Like somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, here, you want these Xeroxes of the HD book? Like this is Robert's manuscripts." And you go, "Yeah, I'd love that." You take it home and then 10 years later, it's absolutely crucial in terms of someone's request that you take a look at somebody else's manuscript, which anyway. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want to get into the personalities. It's like really boring. But but there they were. I had stuck them in the back of a file cabinet for 10 or 15 years. They just sat there. And then when I needed them, there they were. It's amazing how stuff like that happens. And then, I mean, Robert, he was a persistent reviser, but not a methodical reviser. So he would have maybe 5 manuscripts of one chapter going at a time. And some of them probably were in a filing cabinet in San Francisco. Some may have been at the beach house in Stinson Beach, where he also worked. He liked to work there. Uh, so when the stuff came to Buffalo when he died, there were like, you know, so much paper. And there would be like five different copies of a chapter, or maybe more even, and they would all have different revisions on them. And some of them would have been from before the magazine publication, and some of them would have been after the magazine publication. Um, so the he didn't he was not he didn't care. He didn't care, you know. He just was thinking and thinking, and he had to get a manuscript and he had to change it, and that's all he was thinking about, which was beautiful because then you don't have to make any decisions. You just say, put it all in. Whatever, all of it, just put it all in. Um, I mean, there was one or two places where it got kind of confusing and had to be sorted out, but mostly it was just put it all in. Um,
That seems true to the just the style of the book and the way his mind works, putting it all in and syncretizing everything. And it's wonderfully creative. It's also a little ADHD. It's sort of all, all
I
over.
know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you see that Peter, what's the New Zealand guy, movie director, Peter, who did The Lord of the Rings?
Jackson.
Jackson. Did you see Peter Jackson's 8-hour documentary on the Beatles preparation for the Apple concert?
I
Anybody?
did. It was fantastic. Yeah, I saw it on the rooftop. Yeah.
It was the best representation of the creative process at work I've ever seen. And those guys were amazing. And they would just exactly what you were saying. They'd come in, they'd sit down, and somebody would start playing, God Save the Queen. And then somebody else would come in and then they'd doodle around and it would turn into the Saints Go Marching In. And then suddenly, you know, John would be playing something he just wrote. Uh, I'm sorry, my mind is gone
Was
blank.
it Don't Let Me Down, or that was a
Don't
big.
let me add anything, like something that was like so familiar. And
Yeah.
then they would pick up on that and they'd work on it for a while and then they'd start playing the Saints Go Marching In again, right? It was just this completely open, free flowing of imagination into music
Yeah. Well,
without,
and
well,
going from the tradition to innovation to going back and forth is what they
yeah,
were. Yeah, it
back
was
and
great.
forth,
Yeah.
just letting the music come out from somewhere, wherever it was coming from. And and eventually giving that just incredible concert. And, and again, like fate intervenes, right? Billy Preston walks in at one point, and then he just becomes the keyboardist for them. Like it's like, wow, it was like an angel just came in out of the blue. Um, but I think that I think of this book like that in a way. I mean, that's the same kind of just open letting stuff come in, letting it come in more and more, explication, opening, digging up the ground.
Cool. And Victor, how did you and Victor work together on it? What was that?
Um, we, I didn't, I guess I met Victor. I mean, I knew of Victor for many years, but I didn't meet him until late. Um, and we got together to have lunch or so, and he discovered that I had all these HD manuscripts.
Oh,
And together with a complete collection of the small press public, like all the little magazine publications. Uh, so I didn't actually. That's what it was. It wasn't the ones with the revision. It wasn't the manuscripts. I'd forgotten that I had those, I think. So I gave them to Victor. It turns out was a great typist. Like I don't know. He like does hundreds of words a minute. So he just retyped them all. And then my wife and I had just bought a cabin on Georgian Bay near the Bruce Peninsula. And so Victor and I would go up there for the weekend. And then we would just take turns reading the manuscript to each other. And that was like, it was pretty terrific, like that's all you had to do was live with Duncan for, yeah. And that's what happened. That's how it happened.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah. It was, I mean, I don't know. I like working with people. I don't particularly care to work alone. I mean, I can work alone, but if I have an option, I'll go work with somebody. It's a lot more fun. Anybody want to? I can pull up a, for me, this is the heart of the discussion about the occult. Towards the end, he says, he's just talked about the Atlantis fantasy and
What page?
it's on 149, and what a huge role that fantasy had in shaping his imagination. And then discussing the disreputableness of the Atlantean fantasy among the scholars. And he just says, it's just two sentences. In the Atlantis fantasy and the Atlantis game or play, the most real emerged only in terms of what was most unreal. It was an experience true and untrue to itself. The most real emerged only in terms of what was most unreal. So that's a proposition about how we think, what we understand knowledge to be. I mean, what is it? What do you know? What do you know? Like Atlantis for Duncan, the truth of that story is not in its claim to reality. On the contrary, it's an expression of what's more real in the form of the thing about those fantasies is that they're not bound by the strictures of what's true or not true, what's the that kind of judgment, material judgment. It's your imagination giving form to something, to something. What is it he says? He calls it, it's mysterious, right? He says, in this ground, the soul and the world are one in a third hidden thing, in imagination of which the work arises. So the third hidden thing is what the work is about. A hidden thing.
Michael, where is that quote? What page?
Well, it's the very beginning of the chapter on Eros, on
Okay.
79.
Thank you.
What is the work? I mean, what does that mean? Well, here's another quote for Cass from the palimpsest. For another way of thinking about thinking mythology. I'm not sure what it is. It's like mythology as a mode of thinking is like poetry itself, in the sense that you don't get it. You don't get it. If you're lucky, it gets you. It gets a little piece of you, like a really good poem, right? The kind that you think about for the rest of your life, never leaves you. It's you don't understand it, but the mere fact that you don't understand it or the way that it makes you not understand it means that you can't let go of it. You're stuck with it. To read the universe, this is on page 121. To read the universe as a palimpsest from which one writing has been erased to make room for another, and yet to find the one writing in the other. So one's erased to make room for the other, but it's still in the other, is to see history anew as a drama in which the one is in many acts enacting itself. There you go, Scott. Enacting itself, in which there is an Isis in history, history itself being her robe of many colors and changes, working to restore in many parts the wholeness of what is as Osiris. This is a form that exists only in the totality of being, a form in our art that exists only in the totality of the art's life. I mean, what do other people think about this question, about mythology? Is it alien to you? Is it like a question of scholarship? What do you think about it?
I think of through Jung's lens usually. Just I practiced Tibetan Buddhism for 3.5 decades, so that's my primary way I work through it. But originally, the languaging and whatnot was through Jung, and just seeing these myths and gods and stories as archetypal, emblematic things that are real and they're there and will come up again and again in
So
our
what do you tell?
lives.
So what do you tell Cass? Like, how is he? If he doesn't, it sounds like, where's that letter again? What does he say?
Well, yeah, well, I don't know if they're going to Yom Kippur. It's a very monotheistic trip. So this, I think, Duncan's a polytheist, like as
Yeah,
Pound,
yeah, but
played.
I think Cass is not. I think Cass is a little more open than that. So here's the quote again, and of course the browser wants to misbehave always when you do this on Zoom. But he
Oh,
says, I struggle with my feeling. I struggle with not feeling my knowledge of mythic or religious systems is complete enough to participate in the constellation of meanings that such allusions evoke. On the other
well,
hand, go ahead.
okay. I would first of all, Mike, I would say there is no fixed constellation of meanings. There isn't. That you bring what you know into a relation. You constellate based on what you know, and the more or different stuff that you know, the more or different the constellation will be that you bring into being, you know?
Well, and kind of jumping off of that, like the constellations themselves are not a fixed thing. Um, they were patterns that were seen from the stars, but I mean, they're not something you're going to see from a universal perspective all the time, unless
No.
you've been schooled in that or trained in that tradition.
Yes.
I think there's a problematic assumption in the question as well, in as much as he moves to thinking that it necessarily moves into rational or intellectual understanding and not creating a space when it opens into the experiential. I think there's a,
Yeah.
there's a gap there that's a bit
Yes.
problematic.
If Duncan's doing his, oh, go ahead, Julia. Sorry. Julia, go ahead. You're muted.
She's going to take a minute to unmute here.
Well, while Julia's unmuting, I'll just say that it seems to me like a really reasonable question. If, like, some of you have studied Duncan for years, but if you're coming to this book for the first time, there's a whole bunch of shit in it you've never heard before. How do you approach it? Do you track
Well,
every little thing down? That seems to me the second part of the question. Like, if I go all like grad school research mode, is that going to get me any closer to what Duncan means? Do I just let it wash over me? Like, I probably am reducing his question way too much, but it seems like a legitimate question for somebody who doesn't normally read this group of writers. either Duncan or the high modernists to bring to this literature.
Yep. No, you're right.
I think you have to try to meet him on his, well, I said this already, but meet him on his ground, so to speak, that he's and that's why this is like a book you're going to reread, or at least I'm going to reread a whole bunch of times. And I I can't get through a page without diving down that how did you put it, the grad school route.
Well, the grad school route is going to take you into Alice's Wonderland. Because
That's why
for
I like
instance,
it.
I was reading it this time and I wound up chasing down Yeats's Per Amica Silentia Luna. And that was a mind trip, to say the least.
Yeah.
But
It also made me re-question Spicer's first lecture for the Vancouver thing about what he was actually up to there. So,
but also to go back to Cass reading this book, what you and Michael's comment, what you bring to it is part of what you get out of it. And Cass can come to this book in 20 years, have had many experiences, can have a better understanding of how certain things in his life come back to him. He thought he was done with it in 15 years. The same impulse comes back, often involving Eros, oddly enough, Eros often being the catalyst of it, and he's going to get something different out of it. And I think that's what great art demands, that there's a substrate, the subtext, that there's a foundation there that you can go deeper and deeper into, depending on the depth of your own experience with all this material. So the first time I read projective verse, how the fuck do you make any sense of that? And I'm like, am I writing projectively? Michael McClure told me to read this essay, and I read it, and he said to read it out loud. So I went and recorded it at the radio studio on the overnight shift between Sonny Rollins records, and I'd queue up the next CD and go read 2 paragraphs and come back, and I listened to it over and over and over and over. And I think getting inside something, especially Hermetic work, and I think Duncan qualifies, is to immerse yourself in it, to invest a great deal of psychic energy into it if you think it's worth it. And the shortcomings of Duncan we've scratched at the surface of that, and I think those are valid in this discussion. I don't know that he's dualist necessarily, but there are shortcomings. And, if you read the letters of Duncan and Levertov, you really get a sense of that. So thank you. So I think, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say something to Aaron. I hear you. Listen, I hear that all the time, and from different people about poetry. Duncan, I mean, there's so much different kinds of poetry, You Duncan's poetry is a very, very specifically engages in a conversation with the whole tradition of poetry. Like everybody's in here, right? And philosophy. I mean, this is a guy.
Or at
This,
least one stream of the tradition.
yeah, right. Okay. Um, but so this is like an invitation to join in, figure out what interests you in this conversation and pick up on that. Olson once said, I don't care what you study, but you need to pick one thing and do a completely thorough job on it. It could be barbed wire, you know, and if you pick it up and follow it through, it will end up opening up the whole world to you. So I don't know what to say I don't, I mean, it's like, it's like grappa, you know, you like it or you don't. Oh, hello. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question. I mean, if you find it interesting, then you just start working at it, you know. You look stuff up. And the more stuff you look up, the more a part of the conversation you become, and the more exciting it is, and the more interesting. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with it. There's stuff in here I'm interested in. I just thought, like
yeah. No,
before
I
we
didn't
take
take.
apart the question on philosophical grounds, maybe just acknowledge like, yeah, that's a reasonable question.
Totally.
And
It's a
Julia's
totally.
unmuted now.
Yeah.
Um, well, I respond to Erin too. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
This is my third time through this book, and it won't be the last. And there are things I get, and other times I can't get it. And it's, I don't know, it's like, osmosis or something. But I do know I have to have a certain quietness in me to read this material. Not the same way I can pick up some other book and read a chapter. It's not like that. But what I was going to say earlier was based on what Michael said, what does one think about all this? Pity me when I walked into that school to what would be 7 years with Duncan, having no idea who he was or many of the other people that he referred to. And so I was scrambling and trying to understand what in God's name he was talking about. But what I soon experienced was that he would present propositions about what a poem was, or about any of the other things we've talked in here. And I would find myself nodding. That somehow it's, yes, I was learning, but he was also somehow freeing some part of me that knew something about that, but it had been somehow buried. So I would find myself, shaking my head, yes, and then questioning myself and say, what are you agreeing to here? What are you agreeing about? And it was not the specific, because I was many, many, many times uneducated about the specific. But there was what I'm going to call a cloud of knowing, something more diffuse and bigger.
Yeah.
That I knew, I recognized, almost as if I was somehow remembering it.
Yeah. I have a similar approach to Julia's, maybe not as humble as hers was. I'm 62 encountering this book for the first time, right? And I have some background in weird in Tibetan Buddhism and poetry. But so I find myself constantly, when he brings up a point, I find myself kind of just translating it into, oh, that's similar to what I do with this, or similar to what I do with that, or and so I can pick up a lot of the threads, but I find that just on my my consciousness is more formed. I'm 60. If I read this when I was 25, I'd be it would have been very useful. I mean, instead I read say pound but which isn't so different. But and then I got into weirdo Buddhism. But so I found myself anyway, that's the way I approach this book. That's my approach. Yeah.
And imagine if you were 9 years old and people around you were talking about Atlantis.
Mhm.
We've all thought of Atlantis. We all know Donovan. So I mean we've grown
Yeah.
up with it. Yeah. Hail Atlantis.
And one other thing, if you think this is, let's say, a lot at once, you should have seen the blackboards at New College.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think we should take any of this too serious. Like, I don't think Duncan is like a Kabbalist or a Hermeticist or anythingist, right? He reads this not he reads it as forms of knowledge that have been lost or forgotten or repressed. Um, but all forms of knowledge finally they're just forms. They're not real, right? Like they're a way of seeing the world, a way of seeing the forces that are work in the world. And we all encounter those forces all the time. I mean, we don't necessarily have names for them. Not the names that we used to have, because we are too busy with our screens or whatever, that we're in this other world.
I love if Boyd would read what he put in the chat and engage that discussion. I'd be very interested in that.
Sorry, it took a moment to mute myself. I thought what Julia said was really brilliant, and to me that means a lot in terms of thinking about what poetry is. So what she was describing to me seems really amazing in terms of the idea of what a poem might be, right? And so what uh, and to me, I think about this a lot, and I think Julia said it very well. But what is a poem? And it's not just one idea; it's the abstraction from this to that, and carrying it over into a different space. And it's not something exactly; it is something that allows us to understand symbolic relations and allows us to understand emotions and allows us to understand meaning in ways that aren't confined. So, yeah.
And sometimes not even verbal, wouldn't you say, which is so weird since it's poetry.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What about it? The verbal?
I said he's talking about just what a poem is and the meanings it gets at, the effects it gets at. And for me,
Yeah,
a lot of times those are nonverbal. Like I couldn't tell you. I feel
yeah,
it, but I couldn't tell you,
yeah,
which is so weird when I spend so much time trying to pin that down in my own poems. And if I get it right, I can't say what it is.
yeah,
HD has a whole like riff on that in Notes and Thought and Vision, I think,
yeah.
about the effect of the placement of wisdom in the body or something.
Mm-hmm. Just as a sideline, somebody referred to Duncan as possibly hermetic. At New College, Diane de Prima taught at the same time as Duncan, and she taught a class called Hidden Religions, which really was about Kabbalah and Gnosis and all of them. And we really did stuff. And, so the whole place was permeated, if you will, by an examination of ways of knowing that had not been allowed by the middle class, for lack of a better term, or frowned on by the middle class. So, I mean, there were people around who were actively practicing one thing or another, including Tibetan Buddhism. It wasn't Duncan. He was, if he was practicing anything, it was a kind of poetic glossolalia that kept us all on our toes.
Yeah, I don't know if you read the letters between Duncan and HD. They're really interesting. And at one point, Duncan says that what binds them together, what holds their relationship, is the fact that both of them turned away from the esoteric beginnings that they found themselves in, that he turned away from, not away from, he didn't reject the knowledge, but he turned away from the idea that it was a something to practice, that it was a an actual program. He turned away from that, and he honored the fact that it was and other knowledge, but he didn't want to be a member. He didn't want to join the party.
No, because he felt so deeply that the poem cannot represent anything other than the poem's knowing.
Yeah.
The knowing must come through the poem. Anything, political, religious.
Yeah.
And so that would be totally impossible for him. Whatever he did to to avail himself of whatever sources of power, I don't know what they were, except to work himself up to a fever pitch.
Yeah, it's a passion. Yeah.
Yes, right. Whereas HD, we think maybe did burn a pine cone and.
Oh no, she totally did. But I don't know if she wrote three novels about her, mostly about the war, like her experience during the war. One of them is called The Sword Went Out to Sea. And I don't think Duncan ever got to read those novels, unfortunately.
I haven't read.
Those were not published until the 2000s.
Yes, that's right. She tried to sell them to a publisher. She had Pearson flogging them, but nobody wanted to publish them because they were too difficult. Too, anyway, they were her prose. If you've read her prose, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But this one about the sword went out to sea is about the table the seances that she held with Lord Dowding, who was the Air Marshal of England during the
Right,
Second World
right.
War. Um, and she she fictionalizes this scene, but what the narrator says is basically, hey, look, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why what happened happened. All I know is that it happened. And I'm not going to say it was this or say it was that because I don't know. I just know it happened. It's like the those parts in Tribute to the Angels
Yeah,
where John says, I, John, saw, I
yeah,
testify. And that's it. I saw it, I testify. That's it. You can take it from there wherever you want to take it. But she was not a uh, somehow preaching a gospel
no,
of any kind,
no,
but things happened to her. And when those things happen to other people, a lot of people just like say, okay, I'm going to forget that as fast as I fucking can
yeah,
because
right.
I, I,
Like the
I do not,
writing on
I don't want that to have happened to me. You know, I don't want to see like writing on the wall in the hotel
yeah,
room because that means I'm crazy. Um, but HD, for her, it became a determining event in her life. She never said what it was that happened or how it happened, but it was there, just there, and it opened up dimensions of her experience of the world um, that hadn't been there before. Uh, but she was not a true believer. I mean, I don't even know
well,
what that means.
Michael, what you just said is what Duncan did. His approach to what poetry is, can be, has been, does just that, or did just that. It opened up experiences of the world that weren't there before.
Yeah,
And that's what his, I mean, I think you hit it. That is what his poetics is about.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say one last thing. When you were reading the chapter, the beginning, the opening of the paragraph about history,
Yeah,
suddenly I flashed on what's going on right now and how looking at it that way, the way he's written it there, gives it meaning that
it does.
the everyday events are hard to find meaning in.
What page are you looking at, Julia?
Don't know. It's what Michael read before.
About the palimpsest.
Well, there was that one, but then you read one about our view of history,
Right.
not the one about to write means to enter the illusion of language. Keep talking. I'll look for it if I find it.
Yeah, yeah. There's this great passage. I didn't find that one, but I found this one on 122, where he's discussing Plutarch. Oh, yeah. Well, this is right after that passage, that other passage. The fact is, Plutarch continues that we really have no part nor parcel in being, capital B, but everything of a mortal nature is at some stage between coming into existence and passing away. He, being one, has with only one now completely filled forever. And only when being is after his pattern is it in reality being. So that reality of ourselves and of the universe is a thou. I think that's like really important, right? To understand the universe not as an it, but as a thou. That's kind of like the basis. You want to there, you could start with mythology there, treating the universe as a thou, because thous have form and personality and spirit and soul. And
Sounds very Zen, and it reminds me of Dogen's concept of the time being.
which concept of what, Paul? Sorry.
Dogen's concept of the time being.
Oh, right, the Dogen.
Yeah. Well, we're at 7:22, and that'd be 10:22 on the East Coast.
Yes.
And so if we have any last questions, concerns, rebuttals, what have you, now's the time to get them in. Or Michael, if you have any thoughts, or first open it up for anyone to chime in, get something unresolved taken care of, or at least addressed.
I don't have any questions or rebuttals, but I would like to ask Mike what we should read for next time, because
Oh,
I
well,
think
we have 2 sessions left, right? So
Yeah.
right. So yes,
leap in.
This is insane.
Sorry.
Obviously, we're not going to be able to, I mean, I would just say, Boyd, start reading and see how far you get, you know? I mean, I'd say read the first half for next week and the second half for the week after, but whether that's going to happen or not.
Scott, say it. Why don't you?
Sorry?
Scott, if Scott put something in the chat and maybe he,
Yeah, it's about Hillman.
Yeah, I was just saying like that the book I mentioned earlier,
Oh, Terrible Love of War, right?
Terrible Love of War. It's so relevant because it's
Yeah.
this suggestion that in you talk about occult or that which is not readily available, but it reveals and brings forward the archetypal, the God forces that are running behind the scenes.
yeah.
And it's very helpful. Marvelous book, that one. Hillman is wonderful for those who haven't yet had the opportunity to dive into him. Terrific stuff.
That's a good one.
Do you know that B.P. Nickel poem called Poem P-O-E-M-P-O-M-E?
No.
What is a poem is inside of your body. Have you heard that? I'll play that after the workshop if anyone wants to hang out.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
I have it queued up.
Yeah.
Do you know if Duncan was, or how familiar Duncan was with HD's biography? I think, Barbara Guest's biography came out right before Duncan died.
I don't know. I mean, he seems to have been pretty familiar. I don't know. I honestly don't know how to answer that, Jay. Um,
I know that like a lot of the recent HD scholarship is about how the details of her biography intersect her work. And since we're getting into the sections where HD is much more central, I wonder how much he knew.
well, he knew about crucial stuff. He knew about the Moravianism. Um, he knew about Breyer, and he knew about that HG almost died from the flu, and that Breyer rescued her, and he knew he knew about Krusnacht. Um, the Art Deco palace in the Swiss Alps that she built. He knew about McPherson and the movies. But I don't know about, like, those are all kind of matters of the record in a way. And I don't know what he knew beyond that. I don't.
If anybody's got $6 million to spend, Kenwin is for sale.
Is it really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
seems cheap to me.
Oh, let's chip in and buy it, eh? We can open up a poetics lab chapter in Switzerland.
I'll run it by my board.
Okay.
Their first question is, will they take a check?
Yeah.
So half of the rest of the book
Yes.
in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can kind of skip through. There's a lot of repetition, but it's on purpose. I mean, through repetition, you keep finding differences that open up into new insights. So he goes back and back and back and back. There was some criticism of that when the book came out, that he was repetitive, but that's like so stupid. That's such a stupid thing to say.
Is it insistence?
Sorry?
Is it insistence and not repetition?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Steinian insistence.
Okay, well, happy trails.
Thank you again, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for your
Thank you.
contributions.